Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. I'm Sapna, Vice President of Council of Architecture, and a very warm greetings and welcome from Council of Architecture. Today we have audience from Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Italy, Malaysia, India, of course, and we are really delighted to have such a, all the audience with us. Thank you so much for joining this platform. Just would like to give you a little background of Council of Architecture. Council of Architecture is a body constituted by Government of India under the Architects Act 1972. The Council of Architecture is charged with the responsibility to regulate the education and practice of profession throughout India, besides maintaining the register of architects. CUA Social Platform, where you all have connected today, is an initiative of Council of Architecture India to promote dialogue and discussions within the field of architecture. Under this platform, we have 4 verticals. We have CUA Social Reads, CUA Social Dialogue, we have CUA Social People, and Women in Architecture. Today, we have CUA Social Reads number 50. And it's an absolute delight and privilege to have Vera Rossi, daughter of Aldo Rossi, and Chiara Spangaro with us. Thank you so much for our dear guests who have joined. And this is, I believe, this is our first presentation by Chiara in India. And thank you so much. And now I would request Professor Durganand to introduce our very special guests and take this dialogue forward. And thank you so much for all the participants, for all the audience, our fraternity who have really taken out time to join this platform. Thank you so much. All the best, Durganand. Please carry on.
Thank you, Sapnaji, for the support. Thank President Habib Khan and the Council for the support to the COA Social Reads Forum, which has enabled some of the best architects from around the world to present to India and Southeast Asia. Thank you, Sapnaji. So we are honored today to have with us Vera Rossi and Dr. Chiara Spangaro. Vera Rossi established the Aldo Rossi Foundation with her brother Fausto Rossi. Let me briefly introduce our honored special guests today. And it's an emotional moment because this is the first time we are presenting Aldo Rossi's work in India, despite the fact that in the 80s and 90s, Aldo Rossi had a deep influence in several projects in India as well, from Memory and Fragment, which has not been documented enough. And I think from that point, this reopens another kind of history. Let me briefly introduce our guests. Vera Rossi. Vera Rossi was born in Milan in 1968. After her studies, she moved to Rome and began her career as a photographer, collaborating with various archives, and most importantly, the prestigious state archives and the archives at the Capitoline. Her photographic research investigates images which are drawn from everyday life: windows, still life, interior views, images captured from nature, and reveal a nebulous world of memories and dreams. The material of plexiglass, with its transparency as well as reflective quality, evokes a psychic quality to space in her work. Vera Rossi collaborates with prestigious galleries in Milan, Bologna, Rome, and New York. In 2005, with her brother Fausto, Vera Rossi established in Milan the Aldo Rossi Foundation with Germano Salant as scientific director and Chiara Spangaro as curator. The foundation is devoted to promotion and scientific research on Rossi's oeuvre. Thank you, Vera Rossi, for joining us today. We are deeply honored by your presence and accepting to participate in our forum of the Council of Architecture. Thank you. It's also wonderful to have Dr. Chiara Spangaro with us today, a very well respected scholar who has rigorously researched the works of Rossi. Chiara Spangaro is an art historian and curator based in Milan, operating in the fields of contemporary art, architecture, and design. She is the curator of the Aldo Rossi Foundation. In collaboration with Germano Celant, she served as the curatorial associate for the Art and Architecture Department of the Triennale di Milano. I'll be a little brief here so that I can hand over the presentation to Chiara. A more detailed bio of Chiara Spangaro is posted on our website and on our Insta pages for everyone interested. It's a illustrious long bio, and I would request everyone to visit the page and read it. The theme for today, and we look forward to Chiara's talk on this, is Aldo Rossi, Fragments of an Architectural and Cultural Practice. So we are quite intrigued by what this presentation will be and how we will remember again memories and fragments of that past. So join us to invite today Vera Rossi to share her insights, followed by Chiara. Welcome, Vera Rossi, please.
Thank you, Durganand, for this introduction. Hello to everybody, and thank you for inviting us to this forum, to this talk. It's very moving to me, as you said, the first time that Aldo, something about Aldo face, how do you say, to look out the windows, faces this audience. So, and it's very important to us, as India has always fascinated us deeply, and Aldo also, and that's why he never could, he didn't work over there, but he had a deep feeling for India. So probably it was one of the things he would have loved to do. As you know, he had he left in an unexpected way. So what I can say is that as president of Fondazione Aldo Rossi, I'm here representing in a way the Fondazione and the family. My brother is not talking, but we together in 2005, we came to a moment we realized it was necessary to give birth to a Fondazione Aldo Rossi, as what Aldo left was a huge world of materials, from writings, drawings, projects. So the material was a lot, and we couldn't, sometimes passed from his death to the day we decided to open the Fondazione. As when you leave such a great inheritance, it takes time to sons and daughters to realize and to approach this. But in the end, we met. I had a very good meeting with Germano Celant, and that was the right moment. So to start following this path in a way. So that is when we met, and we made up our minds to start gathering and organizing all the materials he left by themes. So the writings, the drawings, the projects, and the design. He left. He was very productive and very exceptional in all this. In all these temi, campi, now I don't know what to say. So the work we realized in the in the beginning, there would have been a long work to do. Germano was the more indicated figure to face this as a great experience. And he brought in Chiara Spangaro in the beginning. So we are working with Chiara since the beginning, and we formed a very good team from the beginning on the side of the mood, of the feelings, and on the work. So we are still following the path. The work are many. We Fondazione Aldo Rossi aims to organize publications, exhibitions, and projects with many different on the basis of very different themes. So this is what I can say, that for this reason I was very am very grateful that you invited us to this forum and talk, and all, and I'm saying hello to everybody who is listening, and I thank you again very much. I'm here, and I think you should listen to Chiara Spangaro. Certainly will be more interesting than I in the talk on the level of architecture and of studying, as she is the better one to talk on the matters, for your questions, and to share with you this talk. I am here and I listen with you, and I thank you very much. Thank you really with the heart.
Thank you, Vera Rossi. Thank you. We're very glad that you could be with us when Chiara is going to present. And I think we're all looking forward to Dr. Chiara Spangaro's presentation. The theme for today is Aldo Rossi, Fragments of an Architectural and Cultural Practice, a presentation by Chiara Spangaro. So Chiara, we are honored to invite you to begin your presentation. Please. Thank you.
Thank you, Durganand, and thank you, Vera, for introducing me. So I will very briefly try to explain the title I sent you. The title talks about Aldo Rossi, of course, the idea of fragments and his architectural and cultural practice. I never met Aldo Rossi, and I deeply regret I never had a direct connection to him, but I learned a lot about him, reading his books, reading his Quaderni Azzurri, and studying a lot the big corpus of work he left in the field of architecture and art. He was a very complex and articulated figure, involved with the theory of architecture, with teaching, with project and in architecture and design. He wrote masterpieces that are still read in universities today, like The Architecture of the City and a Scientific Autobiography. And he really funded a school and a method and a vision that is kind of unique in, for sure, in the Italian context, but in general in the international one. When I first met Vera and Fausto, it was in 2005. So the story goes to Genova, 2004, City of Culture. Germano Celant, with whom I had been working for 3 years at the Mimo Rotella Foundation, decided to, I mean, he was the curator of this magnificent show on the connections between art and architecture. That was the main exhibition of Genova Città della Cultura in 2004. And while displaying the show in the museum, Museo Palazzo Ducale, he also had some installations in the city. And one of these was the Teatro del Mondo, rebuilt for the occasion near Genova's port. Unfortunately, not on water, because the water was occupied by ships, and they couldn't put it in the water. But for the first time after 1979, the theater was rebuilt. And for the occasion, Germano phoned the heirs of Rossi to talk with them about this reconstruction, and made it possible in this very beautiful and unusual picture that you can see. After some time, we started the foundation. So to try to gather together all the informations about Aldo Rossi's work, because the work itself had been already given by Aldo Rossi himself, actually, and after his death, also by Vera and Fausto, to very prestigious institutions all over the world. As, for example, the Getty Trust and Pompidou, the Centre Pompidou in Paris, and also the Maxi Museum in Rome, the Dam in Frankfurt. So the legacy of Aldo Rossi was already very recognized and belonged to very important institutions all over the world. Nevertheless, there was a very big issue about authors' rights and who were the persons to start the re-editions of books, and, you know, to collect around a center, let's say, all these, and also to organize and connect all the institutions. So the foundation really started with this as a connector, and has a place where the different dialogues on Aldo Rossi's work could start, and also begin, and then get free in the world, basically, and be dealt by other curators and other scholars. And what we discovered, or what I discovered, probably Vera and Rossi and Germano already knew, was that the interest around this very prominent figure was still really, really strong and present. So going back to Aldo Rossi himself, as Alberto Ferlenga, who is one of the prominent scholars who still deal with Aldo Rossi's work, and who curated the show in Rome that has been opened this year for 6 months, a very beautiful show on his architecture and based on the city. He always says that Aldo Rossi had an idea of all cities starting from Milan. So his ideal city was Milan. He had drawn Milan in very many different ways. And strangely enough, Milan is a city that has some Aldo Rossi's architectures. One of the most notable is the Gallaratese, of course. But then, in a way, it's not one of the most important centers of Aldo Rossi's architectures. Aldo Rossi has been building all over Italy and mostly all over the world, but still, as Ferlenga says, thinking about his origins as a being the city of Milan one of the main starts of his reflection on the city. This is a very beautiful drawing he did of the Duomo in the very center of the city. And starting from Milan is also his career in university. So he studied at the Politecnico di Milano, and while studying and joining the Casabella editorial team with Rogers, who was one of the most influential architects of the post-war Italian cultural environment, also because of his anti-fascist, very clear attitude. And Aldo Rossi himself joined FIGC, which was the young legacy of the Communist Party, and then the Communist Party. So as many Italian of the time, not all of them, of course, but he joined his professional life with a political active life. And you can see him in this picture, still student, with a group of students brought from the Italia-Russia Association to tour the Eastern Europe of the communist bloc, actually. And there he discovered a lot of architectures he didn't know. And like the Seven Sisters in Moscow, and in general the regime architectures, and was pretty much influenced by it. Here is a beautiful picture of the Casabella, the Casabella team. It's a very rare picture that we keep at the foundation, and that we actually wanted to actually showed published in the website. Aldo Rossi wrote a lot about in Casabella about, of course, his interests like Boulez or Loos or other Italian architects, but also was a lot published in Casabella when in the 60s and 70s, and then afterwards, of course, he was so prominent that he went over all the papers and the architectural newspapers. Here is Aldo Rossi in the 70s with Vera and Fausto in New York City. It's a very beautiful picture and anticipates what would be, in a way, his international renown. For sure, the 70s were these connections, connecting point between a very intense moment of production in Italy and in Europe, but also established Aldo Rossi as a theoretician that was invited in different international universities, as for example, you can remember the Santiago de Compostela first seminar on international architecture, but he also was invited by United States school like Yale and Harvard and Cooper Hewitt. And in the 70s, he also begins exhibiting his works in United States. First in Leo Castelli Gallery, who dedicated to Italian architecture a very beautiful show. And this was actually the first time that Germano Celan saw his works live. This Architecture One exhibition is a seminal exhibition for scholars like Germano Celant and me in a very second stage, of the possible connection between an art historian and an architecture historian. So putting together two different worlds in a way that hadn't been put together yet. And this is a very, very important point, also for Aldo Rossi, but in general for this kind of practice. Here, Aldo Rossi, so this is a very famous picture of the late 80s, first 90s. This picture has been used as the presentation picture for the Pritzker Prize Award. Rossi was awarded of the Pritzker in 1990 and gave a speech at Palazzo Grassi where the award was celebrated. This picture presents him with his Parigi chair, that is a armchair produced by Unifor in 1989, if I recall well the date. It's a very, very iconic object and quite a comfortable one, although it doesn't show from the picture, but I've tried personally. I couldn't believe it, but it's a very, and shows also how much Aldo Rossi reflected on, let's say, balance, not only in architecture, but also in his design production. He's been very active since the early 80s, also in design, and we are actually conducting with the foundation a deep research on this path that will hopefully give to Catalogue Raisonné next year of the design work that hadn't been studied before. So the end of the 80s and 90s brought Aldo Rossi to the most international and important projects. And he was called to build in Japan, where he built a very extremely famous Fukuoka Hotel Il Palazzo in Fukuoka. He built in Orlando, in Florida, in the compound for Walt Disney. He built in Paris housing building in La Villette borough. He built a lot in Berlin, where he actually had built before, but it's of the 90s, the completion of this incredible block that is between Schützenstrasse and Charlottenstrasse, that is such a iconic, again, building reflecting about the history of the city and the fragment again. Here he is depicted while opening the Bonnefanten Museum in Maastricht that had been built as the new siège of the museum, the already existing museum, with a very iconic cupola that he designed and that has been let's say, decorated by Sol Lewitt some years after. Going back to Germano Celant and Aldo Rossi, in 1987, on the theme of the fragment, a forum put the two figures together for an article that Germano Celant wrote with the title Talking Architecture in the May issue. And Aldo Rossi illustrated the article with a special project called Fragments. So the year was 1987. Aldo Rossi was already quite a famous person, Germano architect. Germano was collaborating with the Guggenheim in New York City and writing for our forum on different topics. So I don't know if it's a little bit blurred because I'm sorry, but this is the fragment project that Aldo Rossi did for the show, for the review. As you can see, it is divided in 4 different parts. In a way, and then in 8 at the lower level. This is the very strong idea of the fragmentation. So a world put together that brings together so many different visions, like, for example, an American building and Borgo Rico municipality building near Venice, a church, the Empire State Building. So all these architectural visions came together in the same composition that was maybe also faxed, drawn and sent by fax in different layers, and then published. As you can see, these are the first 2 pages of our forum, and the second composition, the second 2 pages brings again different architectural layers. As well as some projects that had never been finished, like, for example, in the bottom right hand of the drawing, the San Cristoforo station that actually remained as a kind of a skeleton in the bigger Milan, so in the Milanese how can I say, periferia. In this article, Germano Celant really talks about the happiness of Aldo Rossi's drawings and of Aldo Rossi's architectures, and also recalls, after recalling, all the buildings that are quoted in these drawings, he also recalls David Lynch Blue Velvet film. In this way, because of the way David Lynch worked with images in a fragmented way again, and Edward Hopper's paintings, because of this very, how can I say, crystallized vision of an architecture and of, life seen a little bit from further. And at the end, he writes that these visions reveal how the simultaneous use of archetypal and subjective images in architecture can create a strange world, a rich world introducing myth, fantasy, and poetry into the root-ridden architectural scene without forgetting the documents and the experiences, of history, which is, as you can see, the a fundamental point in Aldo Rossi's viewing and conceiving architectures. Actually, when in my first week of work in Aldo Rossi's foundation, I went to get from the studio, the ex-studio Aldo Rossi, his photographical archive. Aldo Rossi had, he put together an amazing photographical archive of his projects, and especially in the very first projects of the 60s, also the ones he never continued working on, he had done an amazing image research based both on historical images of the spaces, of the places he was supposed to build in, and also photographing himself the details of the ambience he would have to work in. So this attention on the history of the places that is so very present also in the Architettura della Città, and that is so much important, while he would not only choose the shapes, but also choose the materials and go back to the history of the place, is one of the fundamental points of his work. Going from these fragments, amazing. Oh yes, so this is the original. All is original, but this is a drawing of fragments that juxtaposed the previous vision in a different way, and it's been used as the basis of a print, because Aldo Rossi was also an excellent printmaker. And he started printing in the 60s, making prints from his own drawings, basically. And so this is in a Milanese private collection, and is a unique work that he would keep in his studio in another different print, again, that was bigger this time. But I would like to go back to another vision that is quite similar and different and very substantial. So this very beautiful drawing that is actually a print that he would repaint and redraw with tempera and pastel and pen. He gave annotations. It's called Sine Titulo, and it's been done, I think, in 1990. In this very beautiful vision, he puts together the Japan from left to right, the Fukuoka building, Venetian Church of the Redentore, kind of a how can I say, an architecture of the Italian 20s or 30s. And then there is the court of the Broni school. That was his first project in Broni, refurbishing a college, and then he went back to Broni to build an elementary school afterwards. The house on Piloti, that is part of a project. I mean, yes, it's part of a project that has never been finished for a private house near the Ticino. And then you can see the small city in the background of the horse's skeleton. And the horse's skeleton is also topos of Aldo Rossi and skeletons in general as being the, how can I say, the lyrical and also simplest representation of a structure on which you would build on top. And then there is the Aragosta, that is like a magic fish, that is like a magic creature. And the horse and the Aragosta, the lobster, sorry, are connected by this grid, that is the grid of the Cimitero di Modena. And then you see this blue coffee pot that is an American coffee pot, and that has been the inspiration of his work with Alessi, and the start actually, because he started willing to do an American coffee pot, but he couldn't because we were in Italy. He was in Italy and he was supposed to make another kind of coffee machine, which he did, and is the very, very famous Laconica coffee machine. And then there is this big structure that is half statue and half an architecture, because it's actually a monument to San Carlo Borromeo in Arona, I think. That is a place quite close to where Rossi's country house was in Lifa. And but this monument is walkable, so it's a huge statue of this San Carlo Borromeo that you can walk in and you can reach the top of it and the head. And this kind of architectural machine that is figurative and the person at the same time an architecture has always fascinated him a lot. And then what is funny also in this drawing is that the Teatro del Mondo, this very magical theater that he built in Venice and that was rebuilt in Genova when we started the foundation, is in a kind of red square, and Aldo Rossi writes Della Sabaudia on the bottom of the composition, like if this part was a little bit further off his path, but still inhabited with some of his architectures and some of the visions he'd like, and also with parts of the Cimitero di Modena. So these are he writes in the bottom of the composition the places of his work, basically. So they are intellectual places, physical places, research places, inspirations, visions of, as Germano wrote, a very magic and poetic space, so and of his intellectual and practical world. As well as the fragment, there is another very important word, and that is also a very important conceptual point of Aldo Rossi, that is the analogy. So this work That is a print made out of a composition that Aldo Rossi, with some collaborations, did in 1976 for the Biennale, the Architecture Biennale of that year, is another way of conceiving a vision that is urban over urban, so and at the same time quite mythological, putting together some of his works with some of his inspirations, with some of his important architectural topics or artistic topics. This of the analogy is a very important point he also confronts with in the Autobiografia Scientifica, where he quotes two persons, the one as the origin of this thought. The first is Gilbert Riley, and the other one is Jung. Riley is a philosopher, a philosopher, and Jung was a psychologist, as we all know. So I would like to, I'm sorry, I have to translate from Italian. I would like to quote Aldo Rossi directly. So he says, in time and space, he would find the analogy of architecture. So combining time and space, that he would talk about as the fixed scene of humans' lives. So basically, the architecture is where the human life takes place. And this is a concept that he also took in consideration, I guess, while building his buildings. So when he did with the Consolatio, Reiklin, and Reinhard for the Biennale of Venice, this very important print, the references were already some of it is architectures, like the Monument to Partisans in Segrate and the housing building of Gallaratese and the Cimitero di San Cataldo. Again, the Borgo Ticino building we never did, and the Trieste building he never did, but also the Tanzio da Varallo painting that, and it's Davide, the figure on top, right? And some Apollinian figures like the cone and the cube and the sphere that are kind of running out of the painting on the bottom right. This analogous way of proceeding came also a lot into different drawings he did through his artistic work, and was probably also coming from his the place he had his first architectural education. That was Milan. This picture of the Castello Sforzesco in the center of Milan was done by Perresutti in 1943 and shows very clearly how much the city was damaged by the bombings in the last 2 or 3 years, 2.5 years of war. Milan was indeed the center of the anti-fascist partisan group, and was also a very important place for industry in Italy, as it is now, and a very important kind of spreading place to go from south to north and to control the country. So when the war started and the bombings started, Aldo Rossi was brought with his family in near the Lago di Como. Nevertheless, when he came back after the war and started university, the city was completely destroyed. And if some of you know Milan and have been there, you will have seen that buildings from the 17th century, also, Roman remains are quite close to buildings of the 60s and the 70s. This is why, because Milan was approximately half destroyed in the last years of the war and rebuilt with many, important architects also like Gioponti, BBPR, Gardella, and others. And it makes the city a very mixed vision between the very, very past and the medieval part and the very contemporary one. So probably these fragmented visions of Aldo Rossi also came from this, that was his reality and his place. And actually, when he started building, the first building he did was a private home in Tuscany in 1960s that he built with Leonardo Ferrari, an older architect that was a kind of rational architecture. And then he was called by Carlo Aimonino to help him with the Gallaratese building. And this Gallaratese building was part of this reconstruction, and also it was part of a plan of popular housing that would, in a way, make popular homes be better lighted and well environmented by the green. And he started working with Aimonino, but actually Aimonino cut the project in two and gave him his space because he thought that he had so much interesting ideas on the on the project that it was worth making him work on it. And so the Gallaratese, his very first accomplished work, and is an amazing building that can be seen and visited in his public spaces in Milan. And that is actually still very, how can I say, the very strong point of interest for students and scholars. And there is a funny story about the Gallaratese, because I had been there, of course, but the the building is not anymore a popular house. It used to be part of this popular housing of the 60s, but now is run by a very good company who uses the how can I say, the kind of the copyright or the money coming from the visitors that can go in to refurbish the building and try to maintain it the best way possible, which is a fantastic way to help us and help in general the architectures to be renewed and entertained. So talking about Fragments again, this is another or the other major work that is the Schützenstrasse and Charlottenburg block in Berlin. And this one is one of the latest architectures by Rossi. I compare it with the Gallaratese because of its history, because it was a building that had to be rebuilt after German reunification. So Aldo Rossi decided to study the whole block back in the 19th century, back on its 19th century vision. And instead of making one big building, he decided to give the same variety that the block had at that time, and made it through the color, through the different shapes, and also in the inside, all the little cords that give light in the inner part of the block are so much different one to the other because of this will of respecting the very first project of this block. Here I have, going back to the Cine Titulo beautiful drawing we saw before, I wanted to show you a visualization of the structure. So the horse in this very beautiful drawing by Rossi, the horse goes from his inner structure, the bones, and then develops into, a complete creature. And on top right, you see the structure of the Cimitero di Modena, and in the bottom there is this kind of cube that is the ossario of the Cimitero di Modena that is depicted in this not very architectural way of drawing architecture, but still. This is a collage, again on the Cimitero di Modena, using the same spine and showing the different parts of the building as the ossario, and also the part where the smaller tombs are. And this is the it's not even a building, of course, it's a structure, complex. And what is really amazing about this conceptualization of a space is that it is so close to the way he would paint it in his drawings and in his fantastic in his fantastic drawings as the one we've seen before. Going back to structure and to Teatro del Mondo, here is a very unusual picture by Antonio Martinelli, who was a photographer called by Aldo Rossi to take the pictures of the whole constructing process of the Teatro del Mondo. As you might know, the Teatro del Mondo was a temporary project conceived to be built with this system of tubi innocenti, on top of which, so these are like steel tubes mounted like for scaffoldings, mounted in the shape of the theater and then covered with wood. So the structure could be quite easy, let's say, to mount and dismantle, and not very heavy, which was a very important point, because the theater then was brought by water to the Punta della Dogana in Venice, and then to Dubrovnik afterwards, and then came back. So talking about skeletons again and structures, and you know what is the inner part of the architecture, I found that this picture is really talking about this too. And here you can see this magic vision of the theater close to the Punta della Dogana, where the sphere on the top of the theater recalls the sphere of the Punta della Dogana that moves according to the wind, showing, you know, the direction of the wind. This is still one of the most magical visions in the memory of all the people I talked about, Aldo Rossi. They all get so much impressed after so many years about this theater and the magic of it. This is a very beautiful picture by Luigi Ghirri, and here again, so Luigi Ghirri was a very important Italian photographer who started in the architecture realm, but then went to a very personal and artistic realm, and he's probably the most renowned Italian photographer still today. He died in 1992 or 1994 and had worked with Aldo Rossi for 6 years, photographing mainly his Italian projects, because he mainly stayed in Italy. And when Aldo Rossi changed his office and went from Via Maddalena to Via Santa Maria alla Porta, Luigi Ghirri did amazing pictures of his first historical office that are still in their archives. And I find this image so talking about the need of Rossi to have so many different objects around that would be about his work, or that would be tools, that would be books, that would be, you know, many different implications that would enter his studio, his mind, his way of projecting, of drawing, and so on and so forth. And going back to, you know, our work in the foundation, the very compelling and interesting idea that Germano brought into our way of dealing with Aldo Rossi's work was to enlighten as much as possible this incredible variety of his talent. He was an extremely talented person dealing with so many different topics. So while we started working with his books, trying to actually look after the many requests of translations and reeditions, especially of those two very important publications. We also begin, like, imagining in how many under how many different points of view we could present Aldo Rossi to the public, and how much we could enlighten and give the appropriate attention to, all the amount of work and research he did. And we were lucky enough to have the possibility to join the Comune di Milano, so the mayor's office. Also, because usually, a foundation and an archive is sometimes perceived as some conservation kind of place and not an active kind of place. But in my experience in the Aldo Rossi Foundation, our life has been so active in many different ways. So this image that shows the Sandro Pertini monument in Milan reminds me of when we were called to help the Comune di Milano, the mayor's office, to refurbish the monument. So the monument had this the monument is in the very center of Milan and is one of these Rossi's architecture who actually made a lot of people talk well, talk bad. It was such a polemics in the early 90s because of this very contemporary and also physical presence in the very center of the city that is usually untouched, or as all the Italian city centers. So Aldo Rossi conceives this amazing monument that is both welcoming people, because it's a kind of stair on the other side of the monument, and on the back there is this fountain that didn't work, and actually the pump of the fountain is inside the monument, and the place you get inside the monument is completely out of law because it's really dangerous for people to get in from the top of the monument with this very small staircase. So we were asked to approve a refurbishment that would let people get in a safer way, and we collaborated with the municipality for this, and also with the municipality of the Segrate monument to clean the fountain and refurbish and also to approve the plan of refurbishment of the monument in Segrate. Then with Germano and Gaia Aulenti, we also we also make shows, and we did some smaller ones that were devoted to Aldo Rossi in Milan at the Ordine degli Architetti like 6 years ago. But one of the most impressive we did was this on the theaters of Aldo Rossi that we did in 2012 in Venice in collaboration with the Fondazione Emilio and Anna Bianca Vedova that would present the work by Rossi in the field of theater, because he not only built a floating theater, but he also left unfinished the reconstruction of the Teatro La Fenice in Venice, which was a competition he won in 1996, right after the theater was destroyed by a major fire. And in between 1979 and 1996, he had worked for many different theaters, building the buildings, like in Genoa, for example, or also making scenographies and for the Scala or for the Puccini festival. And also he was an architect, but he was also very fond of cinema and theater, and generally speaking, a very cultivated person. So all those themes would enter his work, and this was a way to, explore the theater. I mean, the idea of theater in Aldo Rossi's work. This is a very small show we did in Bratislava last summer. We have been invited by, the foundation has been invited by the embassy of Italy in Slovakia to present the work of Aldo Rossi. So we decided to make a very simple, it was the first time that that Aldo Rossi's work were sent to Slovakia, and we decided to make a very simple exhibition of his beautiful drawings that would attract the major public, and not only the architects. It is very easy because those drawings are so amazing, and so we did a kind of carrellata, as we say in Italian, like a jump in 30 years of Aldo Rossi's drawings in architecture. And this is a very recent collaboration too, and it's with the Maxi Museum in Rome. So Alberto Ferlenga curated the show with the scientific collaboration of the foundation. The show has many things had been postponed because of the pandemic, but they could finally open it. And the show presents mainly the Maxi collection, but in terms of drawings, but the very important research of models and display of this beautiful spine in the middle of the show with the reconstruction of these physical works done by Aldo Rossi Studios over 30 years had been a great success among, the quantity of works displayed. I will finish with this image that is the Città Copernicana that is again kind of an analogous composition by Rossi that he did in 1933. And it's always very stimulating, a very beautiful vision for me, because it really brings together the shapes that he did with the shapes he imagined and loved, with the visions of Cyronian urban visions, and the text and the idea of this vision of the world that Niccolò Copernico would bring with him. And I hope that the foundation can continue collaborating, because it's been so important for us over the years to build good relations with all the institutions and partners and scholars and students that write us from all over the world. And hopefully we can continue working like this by Fragments, but also trying to reconstruct this poetic and intense world of Aldo Rossi. Thank you.
Thank you, Chiara, for that very fascinating presentation, but also with the rigor of research which comes through, and yet poetic. Maybe I have a few questions which we can, these are not really questions, they're some thoughts. And so it's really not a question answer, but more just some thoughts from what you presented. What is interesting, and we can come back to that a little later, what is interesting is, in a world which is now being taken over by technology, in a world that is being taken over by the quantitative, in a world which is talking about efficiency and speed, what I'm more curious about is, if we were to delve into some speculation on the imaginations of the mind of Aldo Rossi. I know it's not easy, it's a complex imagination, but some speculations, because when we had been there to Italy, I mean in the 80s, and that time Aldo Rossi was actually doing a project in Genoa at that time in 87, 88. And there were the influences of Terragni. There were the paintings of Di Chirico, which we were discussing. This was at ETH Zurich. And also there were these, you spoke about briefly about the political career or the political engagement, with communism, and the fact that Rossi had traveled to Russia when he was young, isn't it? He had actually gone to Russia when he was young. And so there was one set of influences which appeared, I say appeared because you ended with the idea of poetic, and there was a paradox of the poetic and him calling it a scientific autobiography. So there was one side which wanted to say science, which wanted to say rational, which wanted to say bring in objectivity. But there was another side which was all the time going back to archetype, going back to fragment, going back to myth and memory, and which was poetic. So I think when he won the Pritzker in 1990, Ada Louis actually called Rossi he described him as a poet who also happens to be an architect. I think the Pritzker citation says that, along, of course, with his drawings and the design production which you discussed. So to me, and also the fact that the artifact of the fragment opened many, many possibilities. There was no pressure, there was no compulsion to complete a picture. The fragment could build, the fragment could change its memories. And so I think that was something that Aldo Rossi contributed as a new imagination to architecture in the 90s, in the 80s and 90s, that if modernism had tried to give a complete picture of an object sitting in nature, Rossi opened it up again. And if modernism was losing its connection with the past, Rossi had a resistance to it to open it up again to a past which is maybe even conjured, not a real past, a mythical past in the mind, and I think that was the power that we received in the 80s. I'm talking the 80s, very long back, of what Rossi. So I'm looking at a very strange cycle happening, that with the neoliberal globalized world, when there was suddenly software parks and we forgot history for some reason, and cities began to look alike across the world. In the early 90s, Rossi was talking about memory, talking about having to connect back. And today we are in a very different way, with large infrastructure, with no time engage with history, almost as if we have a memory of those 90s. And so could you elaborate this idea of memory a little? What did memory mean to Rossi? What was he trying to deal with in memory, or his connection with history?
So I think I couldn't talk for Rossi, but what I imagined when I read his books that are, as you say, really books and articles also, I find that in his figure, two points come together. One is a very scientific side that analyzes the history of a place, the politics also. I mean, what all the sciences that are involved in history, which means, yes, the history of building, but also the history of a population, of a religion, and this analysis would probably conjure to a reflection on a future architecture. And then, depending on the places and on the occasion, the architecture itself would raise in different ways because of the liberty that would be given. So, for example, there is this amazing museum in Vassivière in France that is built as a lighthouse with a chamber, but then there is the Gallaratese that is built, has a very strict white and concrete building. So I think, I mean, my idea has always been that he would bring in the memories of places, of structures, of civilization, and then mix them a little bit also with his own experience, which makes really his architecture talk about different aspects, and then work with this mixture.
Wonderful. If we can kind of, I think you covered most of my other questions, but since if Vera is still here, I'm just curious to know from you, Chiara, and maybe Vera can add something to it. When he writes the scientific autobiography, we generally see Rossi from outside, and because Vera is here, Vera, you may just speak how much ever you want, and you may not speak if you don't want. I'm just asking some questions. Because when you write autobiographies, it's an autobiography, it's a scientific autobiography. And as Chiara wonderfully presented this idea of the fragment, the myth, and the manner in which
You're free.
fragments give you language, memory, But I'm just curious to know, Vera, because I know you are a photographer. Your brother, I think, is
An artist.
in the arts, or is an artist. And I think your mother also was involved in theater and cinema. So what was that kind of an influence in conversation within? That kind of lended itself to Aldo Rossi understanding the nuances and paradox of drama and theater so well that he knew it was not about complete, it was about to give suggestions. But so when we see the Teatro del Mondo, at one level it seems to belong to Venice or belong to Italy. But at another level, I felt as if it was feeling very different and alone. It was a very strange paradox, where at one level it feels like it's part of the cultural milieu, and at another level, even the way it's placed today in that square looks as if it is from somewhere else. And this ability or this paradox to be from somewhere else, as well as to give a memory of the past of that same place, I think was one of the very deep nuances that Aldo Rossi had, that it was not really talking about the past and trying to make something which is connecting with the past, but it was always a paradox of also not belonging, and at the same time talking about the past and a desire to belong. Could you elaborate more from the kind of discussions you all had at home, or the kind of discussions Aldo Rossi and you all had?
Yes, what you're saying is very defining Aldo, I think, in this not definition. In the way that he, I can speak as experiencing the father and the man. It was a characteristic of Aldo, what you're saying, to be both in the place, very present to things, very scientific on things, and very like we are doing this here and now, but at the same time it's coming from elsewhere, and I am here, but I'm really not here. And this is very true. The Teatro del Mondo, in a way, can be like very symbolic on this. It's true. It's like a lonely building that comes from far away, in a way, and at the same time is in the place, perfectly in that place, because it dialogues with the place he put in. But in fact, Aldo said the Teatro del Mondo was supposed in his mind to travel, to go everywhere. That's why Teatro del Mondo, the theater of the world. And also he loved very much the movie by Herzog, the Fitzcarraldo. If you know the theater, if someone has seen this movie, but the theater was with this difficult travel of the theater, and this is one aspect of Aldo, of being at the same time also cheerful and melancholic. I am being there, but also feeling like he was dead already. He always said, I am here, but I might be dead. And it's like this. So the memory becomes also perception of what could come next, in the way that there's not a definition. It's like if Aldo, about what you were saying before, always experiencing him as a man or as child, or what I could see of him and perceive of the world in a way, because through a father or a mother you learn to, like if you scientific and the poetry and the magical, like if in some moment of his existence, of his life, or whenever, who knows when, he faced and probably had the perception of something that is from here to maybe part of the universe we cannot experience. And there is, you take out the scientific, the rational, and the magical, and the poetry. So it's like he could put all these things together on the basis of a very, of course, serious and fundamental formation. But it's like if something captured from that universe that in a way is beside us, but as the both scientific and the poetic things to bring together. This is what I can say, the perception of the man and of the artist. So
Thank you.
in a way.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful, because I think Chiara's presentation and the research, for me also, I've seen and read Rossi quite extensively, both the books and his work. So I think today's presentation was very revealing, because when you see it after 15 years or 20 years, and the interpretation, the way in which we connect with it. And I think that was probably what Aldo Rossi also wanted, that an archetype of the past actually becomes an archetype with possibilities of the future, and by situating it in that no time zone, I don't know if it's the right word, but there's no time zone, and that was the possibility of a fragment or an artifact in a city to actually gather and bring back memory. So in a city where there is no memory, in a city where everything is banal, or in a city where construction is happening with no idea of history, but only with technology and efficiency in mind, but not about the human being, I think Rossi must have been, as you rightly use the word, we used to always feel the melancholy in the way the drawings were made. But at the same time, there seemed to be a very serious hidden humor in that melancholy. It's almost as if you are saying, you are questioning whether human beings are reflecting on what architecture is about. There was a certain humor about that which allowed him to be distant. Now, these are my readings. I'm not saying that.
Yes, true. I agree.
And yeah, please.
If I can say something, I think that there is not that it's volunteer, but there is in both writing and buildings a kind of tension to an archetypal. So the drawings, as you know, the representation of a theater as a theater, a tower as a tower, and then this kind of reflection about something that is a kind of a pure, and then that is adapted in the world differently, but starting from something that is pure, like Boulez, for example, shapes, or elements that remain archetypal, and that you can find from the 60s until the 90s very often in Rossi's architectures, and still adapted to the context, or forged on the reality in a way.
Yeah, wonderful. Because I think what you just said, Chiara, and what Vera was discussing, is it allows us to open new questions on the relevance of what does an architect mean in a society, and those profound relevances, which are about life, which are about philosophy, which are about how we inhabit the planet, and how we look at community history gathering, but in a poetic way, in a dramatic way, in a theatrical way. So there is a distance, there's an abstraction which gives space in the mind, and at the same time one can celebrate the inhabitation of those structures. So it is very paradoxical in each of the stages, whether it is the skeleton which brings other kinds of memories, but then if the skeleton is going to become a body, then it is an optimistic skeleton. It's not a melancholic, pessimistic skeleton where a body becomes a skeleton. It is a skeleton that becomes a body. And so, just the process of whether it goes back or whether it goes forward or how it gets situated, I think begins to open all these other questions, which are probably very much more relevant for today. So I don't see this discussion as a history of 1992 or 1997, of which we were all part of. And when we were at ETH Zurich, it was a much stronger part, because there was also Snodsy there was Grassi. It was a very different kind of the Berlin fallen down. There was definitely no internet and mobile at that time. So we had no GPS. But still, there are a lot of themes or imaginations that Chiara so beautifully presented today, which I think are relevant not just to Italy, but relevant for a conversation across countries. And I think the manner in which what fascinated me, and I know it was only a history, and that we're very honored that Vera is here, and me is the emergence of family, the emergence of the kind of paradox and conversation in family, to this idea of poetry, to this idea of theater, to this idea of how can we re-look at life if we are looking at it at a distance as an abstraction, and yet with a very deep pragmatic seriousness. Both are there together. It's not. So how do you really create that depth and at the same time show an abstraction, and which then occurs because I just thought that probably, and I know I'm doing a lot of speculative reading, that Aldo Rossi decides to use the word autobiography. He doesn't use another word. The scientific autobiography was in a way to embed the fact that this is not a theoretical premise. This is about an genuine autobiography of even one's life, which gets overlaid on the history or the unfolding of architecture. That the two are conversing, and when the conversation happens in life, and the fact that someday I think we need a conversation with Vera on what were kind of influences, into photography, to move into glass or plexiglass, and again see another kind of distance. That here is ways of seeing. Here is ways of how cities are not a product, but cities are about becoming, and cities are a process, you know. And I think, Chiara, your presentation really brought that out, and which is why I'm responding today. That these are the possibilities one needed to look for in what are the kind of cities we are making. And we seem to have forgotten these lessons across the world. We've completely forgotten these lessons. And it's not about time of the past, it's not about history, it's really about how do we understand life on Earth, how do we understand abstraction and distance, but at the same time, we are completely celebrating. Complete celebration and distance is the paradox in what Chiara so wonderfully presented today. You know, I was observing the conversation and the slides, and I think that threshold or that liminal line between actually being there, and when the Teatro del Mondo came, I said this kind of seems to represent this idea so beautifully, you know, as a project. I would say the other projects are probably more strict or more strong and go more towards, so there are some that go more scientific, there are some that go more, so there is that swing also that happens based on maybe the phase of the project, the program of the project, the context of the project. But I think overall, this is the message I got from Chiara's wonderful presentation today. And Vera, thank you very much I was very curious about this autobiographical part, and to hear it from you is very important to us, because it is really about how one is perceiving life. And you said that even as a persona, there was a melancholy and there was a happiness or a celebration at the same time. It's not easy to understand, but I think and the project shows. So thank you very much, and for that wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
I thank you too, and I also would like to add a very last thing. I think it's interesting to know that Aldo Rossi did his Autobiografia Scientifica in 1982, and he was not ready for an autobiografia because he had so many things to do. And my very liberal interpretation was that he suggested a method. He suggested his method. And this is the point of this book also, you know, in regards of other kind of memories that are in the Quaderni Azzurri. And the other thing I would like to stress, I said it before in the presentation, but in the Autobiografia Scientifica, when he talks about the analogy, he says that the connection, the origin in a way of architecture is the connection between time and space. And so to answer to your question, it's not that I can answer, but the thing is, maybe an architect, which I'm not, who's thinking about a project could think about what is the connection between the place and its history and its origins and the time of a project. And that's it.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. Thank you, Vera Rossi, and thank you, Chiara Spangaro, on behalf of the COA Social Reads Forum. It's been a long presentation, but a very meaningful presentation and conversation. I'm sure all the young architects and universities who kind of logged in today with us have enjoyed the program. I got a whole load of messages from different young architects that I combined into these two questions on memory, on history, on the real world today. Is it relevant, and what is it? And therefore we need to discuss the notion of relevance, and where, so it's really opens, it may look like an end of a presentation, but what Chiara has done is probably begun a new set of questions, and I think these questions we can open up, and I do hope that from the council here and with you all, we can actually meet in person. The pandemic hope is behind us. But the pandemic also allowed us this digital space for conversation. So it was about possibilities, and I look forward to meeting you all again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you for the
you very much.
invitation.
Thank you for the invitation and this wonderful talk.
Thank you.
And thank you, Chiara, because also it was very, I learned a lot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Chiara, for a wonderful presentation.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Dingaland.
Bye. Thank you all listening. Bye-bye.
Thank you all listeners, and thank you to the next meeting, next talk.
Bye.
I hope.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.